Talk about some integration that you can actually do with your identity management, whether it's IBM's or not, and the rest of your infrastructure, and particularly with your SIEM. So one of the things that people like to do on their SIEM is to actually operate rules with a baseline of users. For example, if I have all these users to a sensitive application, I want to know not which users have access to it, because that your identity management can really tell you. Let's say that there are 400 guys that can actually access that particular application. But what I'm interested in is the 20 or so that frequently use that application. Because if I get somebody who is not commonly using this system and all of a sudden is coming into the application, I may want to fire an offense and investigate what is it that they are doing. How do you make that such a baseline? Or for example, when you are recertifying users, how do you know whether the user has been using those access right or not? Well, you can actually get that from the SIEM. So how you create those baseline of users? What you do is that in Curator there is some list, we call it reference sets. And those lists can be populated either manually or via a RESTful API. So those lists gets created like that, and there's an interface for that. But for baseline, you don't even have to begin to use that, because what you can actually do is that create a rule in Curator that reads. And if you've seen Curator, the engine for creating rules, you don't need to do any programming. You just need to know English and the IP lingo. So you say, when anybody has a successful authentication to this group of particularly sensitive application, take the username and put it into a list. And I'm going to call baseline. Let's say that you let that rule run for 3 months to accommodate for people's vacation, and after that time you disable that rule, and that rule has provided you that baseline of frequent users. Now you can use that list in places like another rule that reads, if anyone attempts to log in to this sensitive application and is not into that particular list of frequent flyers, fire an offense, because I want to investigate that. When I'm recertifying a particular user and the user hasn't used that application in the last 3 months, 6 months, whatever you want to define the time to live on those lists, you can actually decide not to recertify the user. So those baselines list can be easily created by having your identity management and your SIEM working together. Let me use another example. Let's say that you have some former users. Let's say that you don't have a privileged identity management in place. That's something that you trust. And what you can do is, again, manually or via RESTful API, you can put former users of a sensitive application, those usernames, you can put them in a list. And again, you can have Curator do things like, well, if somebody is trying to access this application and is on the former list of users, then fire an offense, because that's not supposed to do. Many times also in your SIEM, you get that question and say, well, show me everything that, for example, Jim did. And the problem for the SIEM operator is that, well, Jim has 10, 15, 20 user IDs. It will be hard for me to know which are all the user IDs that Jim had and do a search for it. Well, not anymore, because what you can have is Curator being fed typically by a RESTful API, or it can be manual, of course, but to a RESTful API, and we created a video that shows that, you can actually have your identity management provide all the information about Jim, including all the user IDs that he has, manager's name, full name, etc. And it's trivial to do a query in Curator, a SQL-like query that produces a report and say, these are all the things that Jim did, and under this user ID he did this on that time, and and give you a very nice report. Another example of good cooperation between your identity management and your SIEM is when you know that people are about to leave because they have notified you that they will leave in 2 weeks, or they have the manager is about to terminate the user. You can actually put those users into a particular list or reference set called, for example, about to leave. And then you can use those rules to investigate levels of downloads, type of actions that people are actually doing to make sure that when people are about to leave, they are not taking information that they're not supposed to. Another useful list is a list of executives. Let's say you can have reference sets or list that includes the user IDs of your executives, and then or name with user IDs, whatever the data structures that we have are very rich and can accommodate for all those data structures. So what you can do is that you can put rules that, for example, say, well, if I see an executive resetting his password more than twice a week, file an offense, because it might be that he's losing his memory, which is bad, but most likely it is that his challenge response question system, for example, has been broken into, and he resets the hacker goes in, reset his password, reads his email, then the executive comes back in, he has to reset his email again, and you can actually go, we've seen in companies, this cycle go 3, 4, 5 times until the executive complains that, what happened with this system that I have to reset my password every time. And then when you look at all the evidence, it is seen that they have been breached. So things of that nature, where you want to actually see whether your executive has been actually been phished, you can use your SIEM more effectively if they share lists of those particular groups of users that we have shown in here.